On January 13th, 2006, DMX held a press conference at Sony Studios in New York City. Members of the company that managed him, Rough Riders Entertainment, surrounded him with the expected accessories: double R leather jackets, motorcycles, and, of course, pit bulls. They were all there to signal the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. Since 1997, Def Jam had been DMX's home. He was arguably the record label's most integral pillar of the golden age they enjoyed from the late 90s to the mid 2000s. Altogether, X scored 10 Billboard Hot 100 hits and 5 consecutive number one albums, 3 of which were certified multi-platinum. But then DMX's life, both personal and professional, began to crumble. An increasing rate of legal trouble, the emergence of new rappers and continued success of his label mates, and a growing public feeling of déjà vu regarding his music combined to cause a decline in record sales. On June 25, 2004, DMX was arrested at JFK Airport and hit with multiple charges that included, of all things, impersonating a federal agent and attempting to carjack a vehicle. Although he was given a conditional charge on December 8th, X violated the terms of his parole. Pleading guilty in late 2005 gave him 70 days in jail at Rikers Island, 60 days for the original sentence, and 10 days as an extension. The reason for the extension? He was late to court. Amid this type of chaos were the ongoing recording sessions for DMX's sixth studio album entitled Here We Go Again. By this time, Jay-Z was running the show. He had retired in late 2003 from recording studio albums and was now president and CEO of Def Jam. It was an arrangement that DMX found unsettling. His peer had now become his boss. The relationship between Jay-Z and DMX had always been complicated. The first time they met was at a cramped, smoke-filled pool hall in the Bronx in 1994. It was described as a battle royale between two camps: Brooklyn's original flavor and the self-explanatory Harlem Nights. Jay-Z from the former and X from the latter squared off against each other for 3 rounds in a battle that, according to legend, lasted around 4 to 5 hours. Both hungry, both scrappy, both unsigned. The freestyle battle was too close to call, so witnesses generally ruled the duel a draw, thereby proposing an aura of mutual respect. But when both men ended up at Def Jam a few years later, it was evident who openly wore the scars of that battle. For all his blockbuster sales, DMX was never an awards-winning bonanza. When the nominations were announced for the upcoming 41st Annual Grammy Awards, scheduled for February 24, 1999, Jay-Z, thanks to the Hard Knock Life album cycle in 1998, scored 3 of them. X, who had released 2 number one multi-platinum albums that same year, got none. Jay was upset enough to boycott the awards on his comrade's behalf, even as Hard Knock Life won the Grammy for Best Rap Album, his first of what would turn out to be 24 within the next quarter of a century. But that was never enough to appease an MC who always felt lyrically, and now commercially, superior to the man some referred to as Jehovah, given that nickname because of his godlike ability to rap without writing down his lyrics. And now, a decade after that infamous battle in the Bronx, X had to answer to that same guy. Even worse, Jay kept pushing the release date of Here We Go Again. In DMX's prime, such an occurrence was unimaginable. But with his declining commercial power, work rate, quality of output, and level of availability, DMX couldn't afford to be openly combative. And Jay-Z recognized the building tension between the two of them. So eventually, in 2005, Jay offered DMX to walk away with his unfinished album in exchange for the reported $12 million debt he owed the company. The same company for which he claimed he had generated $144 million in 1998. And just like that, DMX's time as a Def Jam artist was over.
You've left Def Jam now?
Yes, Def Jam. I can't say on the TV.
Yeah, of course you can.
Oh, Def Jam. Give them what they want.
But X was not going to be without a major label home. Sony Urban Music had been formed in 2004 as a division of Sony BMG that handled rap and R&B releases under Columbia Records, which happened to be the same company that signed DMX back in 1992. 2 weeks after being released from jail, he only served a month out of 70 days on account of good behavior. DMX gratefully announced his return to his first recording home. But it would take more than superlatives to alleviate the reality of DMX's history with Columbia and his music career. After all, this was the same place that had given him the boot when his debut single flopped. And it wasn't like X had set the world on fire with his last 2 albums. He had some unfinished material under the name Here We Go Again with him. It was up to him and his right-hand man, Swiss Beats, to turn it into a finished product. The Chinese calendar is based on a repeating 12-year cycle, with each year associated with a zodiac animal. The dog is one of such symbols, the 11th in line out of 12. Coincidentally, DMX was born in 1970, one of the years of the dog, and he was releasing his 6th album in another year of the dog, 2006, which explains why on August 1st, 2006, the album formerly known as Here We Go Again arrived as Year of the Dog again. The Year of the Dog is not only tied to DMX's birth year and the album's release year, but also to X's famous affection for dogs, preferably pit bulls. The album's new name symbolized a rebirth, a chance to restart X's career. More so than ever before, X had a lot to prove. He's still the dominant Def Jam-powered, multi-platinum selling pit bull that assisted greatly in re-establishing New York as the hip-hop region to fear and respect in the post-Pac and Biggie era. Not the washed-up ne'er-do-well furious at the music industry and watching the South pummel hip-hop's mecca with snap, crunk, and trap.
It's time to bring the East Coast back, baby.
Right after the battle bars amid Dame Grease's sparse marching band-styled intro, DMX goes into We In Here, determined to bark his innards out against a record label that he felt betrayed him for Rihanna. By this time, Swiss Beats was a lot more open to sampling than just primarily relying on his workstations. The triumphant horns of Clarence Reed's Nobody But You Babe are inserted here to give a vengeful DMX the boost he needs. As hyped as We In Here is, it does feel forced. The sirens, simulated gunfire, and ad-libs overwhelm the song, and DMX even puts in his prison inmate number, the address of the Rikers Island facility he was in, and his cell block number as evidence of his mettle. This is not the DMX of the late 90s to early 2000s, where only a growl was enough to send shivers down your spine. Now president of Rough Riders Entertainment, Swiss Beats must have felt that he owed it to his friend to get him back on top. Year of the Dog, again, ties X's commercial zenith, and then there was X, for the highest amount of Swiss-produced DMX songs. But there will be no party up magic here. By X's 6th album, Swiss had ceased to be an exclusive production source for Rough Riders. Founding Full Surface Records back in 2001, Swiss was now producing hits for other rappers, most notably his first signee, Cassidy. Swiss Beats was no longer DMX's muse. But X also had other things to worry about. Year of the Dog, again, marks the first truly noticeable decline in the Yonkerite's skills. Years of hard living were catching up with him, and it began to show in his work. Never a top-tier lyricist or technician, the repetitive rhyme construction is more frequent, his outbursts suggest that he was under the influence during studio sessions, and his delivery and barks are raspier and increasingly muffled to the extent that it feels like he's forcing out his words to maximize his loudness. The next track, I Run Shit, is probably the best example of such deterioration. It has a painfully labored and simplistic hook, a beat that feels like Swiss tweaked from the one he did for Cassidy's Hustlin', and a rapper who thinks constantly trumpeting his past accomplishments and threatening to obliterate you would compensate for lackluster rhymes.
You wasn't even listening when I just said what I said. Did you get that? What I just said.
The skeletal synth thump of Come Through, Move is slightly better, with Busta Rhymes, himself a recipient of Swiss benevolence with the top 20 hit Touch It the year before, stops by for the usual energetic guest verse. But it's the Tuneheads, the duo of Where the Hood At from DMX's Grand Champ album, who really tried to get the festivities started with the organ and synth boom bap of It's Personal. The Tuneheads beat is ideal for Locks members and fellow Rough Riders, Jadakiss and Styles P, to assist their fading comrade with above-average street battle bars. At least Year of the Dog, again, has its formatting going for it. It's probably the best tailored and sequenced album DMX ever released. The skits that plagued previous efforts are gone, and the album is comparatively taut at 15 tracks and 54 minutes, with cuts that start with street aggression, mellow out with relationships and reflection, and end with the standard spiritual anguish. Unfortunately, the inconsistency in quality continues to show up going into the second third of the album. The beat for Baby Mother is sunlit with Swiss sampling of a Confunction song, as though to distract the listener from the ugliness of DMX's regret that he has to put up with a mistress with whom he has a child. It was art imitating life. DMX was still married to Tashira, but his infidelity had produced at least 2 out-of-wedlock children by the time the album was released. The soulful Dog Love featuring Marie in the chorus comes right after, as though to soften X's adulterous nature. But when he's lustfully describing his ride-or-die chick, we all know that ain't his wife. It sure doesn't feel like DMX is trying to be contrite. The rock-oriented beat that Elite provides for Wrong or Right, I'm Tired, slaps enough to be decent. But it's not X's finest hour. No thanks to his incoherent bars, a chorus that accuses his detractors as sanctimonious as an attempt to deflect from his bad behavior, and a weird studio rant at the end of the song. And the saving grace of Give 'Em What They Want consists of a simple yet snappy chorus and a Scott Storch beat which merges dancing piano notes, dramatic strings, and a drum beat consisting of thumps and claps. The saving grace is definitely not X's now generic gun talk. Year of the Dog, again, improves toward its final third. In the previous album, only Big Stan from DMX's Bloodline imprint showed up. Here, Stan, who appears on the previously mentioned I Run, is accompanied by fellow signees. Bazaar Royale, a recent recruit, kicks off the previously mentioned Wrong or Right with his rockstar vocals. Kashmir punches in the clock to gallop with X on the fast-paced Teddy Pendergrass sampling soundbed that Dame Grease constructs for Walk These Dogs. And Jinx contributes a verse in Blown Away, a somber piece that has both mentor and mentee detailing their lives of crime and feeling trapped in a never-ending cycle, hoping that the Most High can absolve them of their sins. The presence of these artists signaled that there was still hope for X's kennel to thrive post-Def Jam. And then things get a bit morbid with Goodbye and Life Be My Song, the former with a stirring barrel drum and violin powered beat from TL Cross sounds more like a dirge, paying tributes to unknown friends who left before their time and binding the lyrics with a song hook that suggests that he can't wait to pass away and see them again. The latter, also with a song hook, has this fatalistic aura due to lyrics that allude to living life to the fullest without any regrets, complete with a Dame Grease beat that would make this song at home in any Tupac Johnny J produced posthumous album. Most of Year of the Dog, again, might appear that DMX did not care at all where his fast lane life was headed. Negative. He did care, perhaps more than ever, given his spiraling career and domestic issues. Back in 2003, several months before Grand Champ, formerly known as It's Not a Game, was supposed to drop, DMX had expressed his desire to leave the rap game and become a preacher. Mace, who had done exactly just that at the height of his career, advised him against it. Little did anyone know that Mace was planning his comeback. But dreams of the pulpit didn't seem like a temporary fix for X. The Prayer 6 is the first time where he's explicitly quoting scripture. It's like he was training for the next phase of his life. More scripture is quoted in Lord Give Me a Sign, which closes out the album. There is neither a conversation with God, nor a legacy R&B singer. Instead, there is Scott Storch with an inspirational electric guitar and piano-driven backdrop, and a choir section to fuel DMX, who is desperate more than ever to be guided into a life of divine service.
let me know what to do. Lord, give me a sign.
The best gospel rap song DMX ever made concludes arguably the most uneven album he ever made. Year of the Dog, again, is remembered for all the wrong reasons. For the first time, none of DMX's singles made it on the Billboard Hot 100. An album entering the Billboard 200 chart at number 2 would be celebrated by virtually any rapper in the business. But when you're DMX, the man with 5 consecutive number 1 debuts, this was a letdown, and the 6th album broke that streak. What makes this relative failure especially painful is that only 1,000 copies separated DMX's album from an entry from the Now compilation series. Year of the Dog, again, also confirmed the end of the X-Man's days as a major record selling force. It only moved about 346,000 copies, meaning that he fell short of an RIAA album certification for the first time in his career. It was already bad enough that DMX, who once occupied a prime spot under the Universal Music Group umbrella as a top-selling Def Jam artist, had been demoted to essentially a segregated, read Black, division of a lesser conglomerate. By November 2006, 3 months after Year of the Dog again dropped, Sony Urban Music would be no more. Consequently, Sony returned the division's artists to directly operate under either Columbia or Epic, with a few exceptions. DMX was one of those exceptions. His days as a major label artist were over. Year of the Dog, again, was supposed to be a successful attempt at redemption. However, while it's magnificently formatted and has its bright moments, it was ultimately too mediocre of an album to get DMX back on track. Indeed, it marked the true beginning of his irreversible decline. Ironically, when X barks to follow it in We In Here,
20 million records sold. Why you struggling to go gold?
he should have recognized that he was no longer the million record seller. He was not reborn. Like the guys he mocked, he was now mortal.